This is Sara Mikesell with the PigsSite, working in collaboration with LifeStart Swine. And today we're online with Thomas Bruun. He is a senior swine specialist with Segas Innovation based in Denmark. Bruun has worked at Segas for 13 years. His research is focused on the impact of nutrition of sows on milk production and sow metabolism, as well as the nutrition of pre-breeding gilts on growth and subsequent reproduction. Thanks for being with us today, Thomas.
Thank you for the invitation.
Very good. Well, today's highly prolific sows can cause some issues in the nursery, and we've talked about this a lot in the past. But today we're going to talk about one specific solution, and that's cross-fostering. So, and I know you've conducted some research very recently on this topic, and it resulted in some very practical on-farm applications. And so let's dive right into the topic, and you can feel free to share some of your research along the way if you would like. But which sows are best suited for cross-fostering?
That's actually a good question because we both have to take sow parity into consideration. Because we've done some studies in Denmark showing that if we use first parity sows as nurse sows, the pre-weaning mortality in the litter will be lower than using multiparous sows. That's one side of it, but the other side is if we have first parity sows, they will typically have a lower average daily litter gain. So actually the problem is if we use first parity sows, we will have a lower weaning weight of the litter. So something is talking into using the old sows to have heavier, more robust piglets at weaning, and something is talking into having first parity sows. So actually, what I believe we should be looking for is a young sow with easily accessible tits to be able to take care of the new litter. Then we should also look into the number of lactation days of the sow when selecting the sow as a nurse sow. We normally look out for about sows of about 1 week of lactation, and that's actually typically between 4 and 8 days of lactation. Then we move her piglets to another sow, which wean her own piglets, so that actually the nurse one sow is a sow having at least 21 days of lactation due to legislation in Europe. Then she will receive those 4 to 8 days old piglets and nurse them for additionally that's something about 14 to 17 days. Then they're old enough to be weaned, and then the newborn piglets after ingestion of colostrum should be moved to this sow that has only these 4 to 8 days of lactation. That's what we looked for when we made a review that we published this spring. So that's actually what I believe we should look out for. Then looking out at the more practical side, we should never choose a sow with a very low body condition, because then the risk of shoulder ulcers will increase, and we don't want that to be a problem.
Thanks, Thomas. And so we've talked a little bit about which sow to use. Now let's talk a little bit about the piglet side of the equation. And how do you decide which piglet to move to the nurse sow?
Yeah, I think the most important thing when choosing piglets for a nurse sow is to construct a very uniform litter. The piglets has to have the same size. That's actually the most important part for success. Looking into reviewing the literature, we can see that every time you have a litter that's less uniform, then the big piglets will survive, and the small ones or the light ones, they'll have a higher tendency to die. So to construct a uniform litter, that's good. And then we have to look at the excess piglet or the surplus piglets we have at the current day. Do we have surplus small or surplus big piglets? And then we should actually aim for that. So actually constructing either a uniform litter of small piglets or big piglets. And then we should put those after ingestion of colostrum. I think that's really important to state, that they have to have enough hours At the big piglets, maybe 8 hours before moving, and at the small piglets, 12 hours before moving to a nurse sow, to get the right immunity afterwards. So that's important. So actually then we have to select the sow, of course, according to the piglet size. So if we have small piglets, we should have sows with small tits for those. Otherwise, we'll not have success. That's anyway, that's the time when they have ingested colostrum. We could also, as we describe in our review published in Molecular Reproduction and Development, we could actually also use the 3-step nurse sow. That's used in some Danish farms. So instead just of having the step with the sow weaning own piglets, the nurse 1 at 21 days or more, we have the step 2 at 4 to 8 days, and then we actually add a step 3, and that's a sow that has just finished farrowing. So her own piglets have received enough colostrum to be moved to other sows, and then she still have some time remaining in the colostral period. Then you can actually move piglets in very large litters to this sow to make sure they get colostrum at a sow. And if we look into the literature, of course, some publications show that the mother's colostrum is the best. But anyway, to survive, colostrum from a neighboring sow is also close to be as good as from their own mother. So that's the way of selecting piglets. That's actually to construct the good litter that could be ready for to be moved to another sow.
Excellent. So what are the consequences of using a nurse sow on subsequent reproduction?
Well, that's a big discussion, because if we look into some literature looking at animal welfare, it has been debated that actually this prolonged lactation period could be a problem due to welfare issues. But looking at the productivity level, I'm not concerned about nurse sows, because looking into the literature, they might have a small delayed heat, but that's not in general. So actually the delayed heat is actually mostly happening because they get cyclic during lactation. So actually that tells us that they are in a good energy balance, because otherwise they would not be cyclic at weaning. So actually, when I look into both, I did a study back in 2014, looking into more than 80,000 farrowings. That was about 15,000 nurse sows. We actually saw that they gave birth to about 0.6 extra piglets in the subsequent cycle.
Oh.
And the risk of being culled was also lower, but that's not actually the truth, because when farmers are selecting nurse sows, they are selecting the good part of the sows as nurse sows. So when we found that actually the risk of being culled after was lower, that's because they were selected among the best sows. And that's actually, I think that's an important part to understand, that is that if you are a farmer and you're good at selecting nurse sows, you're good at providing the proper feed management, maybe a feed reduction when receiving the new piglets, and then quite rapidly back to the former feeding level, then you can actually do nurse sows with only benefits on the subsequent reproduction.
Very good. And so you're picking kind of the best sows to start with, right? Is what you're saying. And so those sows are probably going to do a little better regardless, because you've done a good job on that front, right?
Yeah, but you could say the funny thing we found back in 2014 was that the litter size in the parity, when we looked into the nurse sow strategy, the litter size were the same in both groups. So actually, it was not because these sows that were selected as nurse sows, they were not selected because they were better in litter size. It was just sows that looked better. So the farmers believed these sows, they had the right body condition, they had a good appetite, they were already nursing nice piglets. So actually, when you look into a sow to decide should she be a nurse sow, as I mentioned before, body condition, also appetite is important, and of course she should already be nursing nice piglets good-looking piglets, high litter size when you select her. You should always aim for the good sows because they are ready to accept a new litter and they are ready to milk for some additional days.
Right. And as you mentioned, try to avoid those first parity sows, right?
Yeah, but looking into a lot of big herds, you cannot avoid all of them.
All of them, yeah. That's
So
fair.
so then you should at least look into not selecting first parity sows with a low body condition score because we don't want to have any problems with sows getting weaned too skinny,
Right.
because then we have the risk of a delayed heat. We have the risk of getting problems with shoulder also either in the current parity or in the next parity.
Very good. It's almost like a decision tree that you have to think through, right? Is it,
Yeah, yeah,
if it's this, then where do we go from here? And then down the
yeah.
road to pick the right sows for this, for this role, I guess,
Yeah.
on your farm.
Yeah,
So,
and when we see the farms that has very high success with these nurse sow strategies, they are weaning a lot of additional piglets. So actually the number of piglets weaned at each sow, then you can add the proportion of piglets weaned as a nurse sow. We see Danish herds weaning more than 17.5 piglets per litter, so that's quite high.
yeah.
That's that's due to the contribution from nurse sows alongside with the traditional lactation.
Thanks so much for all the information today. This was really a nice look into kind of a practical, very practical look into some of the research that you've conducted. So we really appreciate all the information today.
Thank you too. It's always nice to share some knowledge.
Very good. And this is Sara Mikesell with the PigsSite.